Perfect. So my name is Amber Borden. I am 22 currently. I'm a 2000 baby, so I age with the year. It's much easier to keep track of that way. Currently, I'm actually a student. I'm in a master's program. I just started. It's very exciting. Right now, I'm going to U of T to OISE, their grad school, for a master's of teaching. Um, I got my undergrad at York for psychology because I want to be a teacher. I want to be a high school teacher specifically and teach the social sciences and history. So the very socially conscious subjects. I want to be the teacher that I didn't have growing up, or I had the very kind of seldom really great teachers, the teachers who you feel comfortable and safe in school, like being whoever you are, whether you typically have struggles in school system or not. Like I want to be that safe space, and I want to be so passionate about what I'm teaching that like even if you don't care about what you're learning, like you're still learning something and you care that you are learning. And it kind of hopefully will foster a sense of you wanting to go learn something yourself. So I'm a big psychology nerd. I want to make other people psychology nerds. And I'm a ginormous like ADHD advocate. I actually got diagnosed super duper late, so very, very common for women with ADHD, unfortunately. Oh, my pronouns are she, her. So I, despite being expelled from preschool, was diagnosed at age 20 because I sought it out.
When were you first diagnosed with ADHD?
Yeah, so like I said, my sister had actually originally got diagnosed because so we've got different comorbidities just to keep things spicy. She's got OCD. And so one of her things is she really needs to just know things. Like she actually also wants to be a teacher, but she wants to do math and drama. So together we can just teach a whole school. And so she really needed to know. And so she spent like lots and lots of money getting diagnosed. She got my parents kind of to help her with it. She went through like a specialist and everything and was talking through a therapist with that. And I was like, okay, obviously we know like I'm like the poster child for like I check off every single box. And especially being in psych, like I've had access to read the DSM. Like I know I check off every single box. And so especially too, I'm like, how has this not been a thing? Because obviously they don't teach parents to go get your children diagnosed. They don't teach parents kind of mental health literacy, which is unfortunate. And so I'm like, well, my family doctors know I was hyperactive, like bouncing off the walls. Like I was that kid where like you'd be like, oh, like how much sugar have they had? And you're like, oh, none. They just climb the walls. Like, like I was that kid. And so it was crazy to me the fact that I never got diagnosed. Especially like anytime I tell anybody like, oh, I got expelled from preschool. And they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, simple answer, like undiagnosed ADHD. But I think I just kind of went under the radar because I got identified as gifted early. So when I was in I was in a Montessori school. I got expelled from Montessori school too. Like take that in. But so my sister and I had gone to a different Montessori school up until about grades 1 and 3. And so when we moved to kind of regular mainstream public school, that was like she was in grade 3. And so this was the year where they did kind of like the main screening for like giftedness. And so my parents were like, oh wait, like we didn't do that with Amber, so let's do that because my dad is gifted as well. And so I ended up being identified as gifted. And I think that just kind of took precedent. And I've done a lot of research on like 2E or like uh twice exceptional children. And so the kind of literature on that says like you're going to get diagnosed with the one thing and not the other usually. And so I had great grades. I didn't have to try and I would get like A's, maybe B's kind of thing. All throughout high school, I kind of started noticing that some things just didn't click. Like there was just some struggles that just didn't make sense. And I was raised privileged and I'm very aware of my privilege and I try and kind of acknowledge that every single day. I come from a family that is very supportive typically. However, they are also a family that values education first. And kind of my sister and I learned to associate ourselves with our grades. And so I was like, something just isn't clicking. Like even I was able to recognize at that point, I was like, okay, sometimes if I'm reading a test, like I don't understand it, but a teacher just reads it out loud, the exact question, exactly how it's written, and it like works better. And I had a couple of teachers who kind of like noticed over the years, like there's something like, we want to help you more. And I didn't know what it was. And I had spoken to kind of like an educational psychologist in May 11th, in grade 11, because I'm like, hey, like, what's going on? And they basically just said, like, hey, you're graduating next year. You've made honor roll every single year. You're not a priority. Like, they're not going to do anything. There are kids who are just in grade 9, who are having a lot more struggle. There are kids practically failing. Like, you're just not a priority, unfortunately. And so that, again, just kind of went to the back of my mind. I was like, oh, okay, you're not a priority, whatever, like, blah, 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 blah. And then I just kind of kept moving on. And like,
How has your experience been in educational spaces?
absolutely. So, for me, like, I'm very, like, I know a lot of ADHDers are not so lucky to find such an amazing study habit or method, that works well for them. And I think also just the program of choice for me, I am one of those people where I'm very, very good at coming up with mnemonics. And so if I need like to memorize something, like, I can come up with a trick like super, super quick, like almost like I don't even necessarily have to know what it is. If somebody just says, how can I remember this? I could probably help them out. Like, and so I like psychology again, it's a lot of memorization as well. And I think just having, I guess, kind of more a psych oriented brain, like, it just make more sense to me. And so for something like math or science, like, I might struggle a lot more with the application, everything like that. So again, I got lucky with the discipline that I have. And again, ADHD, while a curse, is also a blessing. Like, because I'm so interested in psychology, ADHD on top of interest, bam, like, I'm excited to learn. Like, again, I've always loved school. Like, I want to be a teacher. I it definitely helps that I'm so interested in the material that I'm learning. And I found a lot of people will just be like, oh, like, I'm taking this course. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you're paying money for this. Like, do you not want to take this course? Like, isn't this what the career you want to do? They're like, yeah, but whatever. And I'm like, what? How did, because my brain couldn't wrap it around, because I'm like, all I know is if I'm interested in something, like, that's it. Like, you can't stop me, like, it's just a force and that's it. And so I definitely found early on, kind of the method that works well for me. And I, again, like, having realized, like, kind of over the years of being in school, like, okay, what works for neurotypical does not work for me. And I think a lot of kind of teachers just attribute that to the fact that, like, oh, she's gifted, she thinks differently, but haha, what they didn't know. And so there's a lot of things that I will kind of approach with a different way to go about it. Or I always loved the courses that were just completely based on the textbook, because I couldn't just sit in a lecture and listen or pay attention. Like, that was impossible. I would need to read the textbook, and I would highlight it with my colors, and I would come up with a mnemonic. I'd be able to like regurgitate the textbook back to you. But when it came to like writing a paper, like, that was something that I would struggle with a lot. And again, like, my ADHD has kind of just gone downhill like throughout life, because again, obviously university is so much less structured than the school day, where you wake up, like, you're 8, you go to school, you're in this class until this time. And so it's the change in structure was definitely a big thing as well. In first year, it wasn't too bad, because I was just so excited about the new environment, and I was on meal plan, so it wasn't like I had to do anything else. I could just go buy my food, eat it, whatever. I got by on like nachos and rice for the first year. And then in second year, I moved into kind of like a suite style residence. So I had to cook my own meals. And so that was better, I think, because I worked at a grocery store. I knew how to shop at a grocery store. It wasn't so overstimulating, luckily, to go to a grocery store, because I'd grown up kind of working there. And I had a roommate that I was really close with. But then in third year, um, it was kind of just me and this other girl I didn't know very well. So I had to make more of my own meals. And so that was when I kind of realized how I already knew I didn't like cooking, but that was kind of when I realized I started falling off with cooking. And I just naturally am very bad at reading kind of hunger cues and stuff like that. And so that, on top of ADHD meds, like, and especially in my fourth year of university, I lived in just this basement bachelor apartment. And it was the worst, probably, for my mental health, but I think it was a very, very valuable experience. Because I just was like, I would like eat Cool Whip for dinner and like go to bed, or I'd come home from school, or I'd have like online like Zoom school, and then I would just be like, well, cooking uses too many executive functions. I will go to bed for dinner. And like, it was a really hard time, because I was just, again, like, brought up on so focused. I was brought up to be so focused on equating myself with my school and like with my schoolwork. and grades. And so I would just put everything into that. And like,
How has your experience been in the workplace?
so I've actually had a few different jobs. All the jobs I've had are very, very different from each other. I guess that makes sense. But so the very first job I ever had was working as a grocery store cashier. And I really liked that job because I was able to interact with people. But it got so boring and so monotonous just doing like this every single day. And so I mean, I would do it like here and there, just like around school and everything. Because like I live in Newmarket. I was born and raised in Newmarket, and so going from like York University, like North York to Newmarket was a hassle. So I'd only work there every once in a while, like during school. And then I got a job working in residence life, which um it was very interesting. I definitely would not want to do it again because there was a lot of kind of sitting at a table and just kind of monotonous, whatever. But I really liked interacting with like the residents. I absolutely adored working at a camp as a camp counselor. I worked with 5-year-olds. I worked there for 2 years. So the first year I worked with 5-year-olds, and again, I think that's a perfect environment for me to work in because I was able to match them with their energy and their enthusiasm. I would say one of my superpowers is just enthusiasm. Like I can summon that out of just nowhere. Like it doesn't matter. Like I'm like, listen, I'm gonna give your kid the best freaking time of their lives. And so it doesn't matter if I'm like on the floor, oh, I've got no iron, doesn't matter. Up I go, here we go, because I'm so passionate about like camp and I want kids to have a great experience. And so that was definitely a really great job for me. Just that type of environment, being a camp counselor, I think it's an amazing job for especially ADHDers. Um, and then the last job that I would talk about is the job I currently have. So I work at a restaurant. It's I work at, I don't know if you've heard of this little place called the Cheesecake Factory. It's I work at it's the only one in Canada, so it's extremely busy. And so I love that job. It's so fast paced. It's amazing. I get to run around, but I'll have servers there just like taking mental orders, and I'm like, oh no, 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 I can't do that. And so I'm writing every single thing down. Like people are talking, I'm like, no, I'm every single tiny little tidbit of information ever. And like some servers will be like, hey, Rosetta, come on, like you gotta go. Like when I was training, I was like, no, 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 you don't get it. Like I have to write it down. If I don't write this down, I'm not going to remember. Like even if they ordered like just a glass of water, like this has to be written down. And so there are definitely things here and there where I've noticed like they've come into play a lot, even just at like the restaurant I work at, because in general, it's so fast paced. It's wonderful. I wear a lot of hats there. I do a lot of different jobs. So it's nice to run around, do lots of things. But like if a manager is ever asking me something, or if they say like, hey, can you get this from like the storage section? I am like, okay, what? 1 second, I have to write this down. Like I'm not going to remember what I'm supposed to be getting. If you send me downstairs to to the elevator to the section where we have all our storage stuff, it could be one thing I'm not going to remember what it is. So let me get a list. And so I've had multiple people multiple times like realize that. And so they either know they have to pause, wait for me to get a list, write everything down, or they are like, no, just remember this. It's just one or two things. Or like, like you have to engage with your guests. And like, do you want me to get their order right? Or would you rather me like have a good time with them? So it's a give and take. It's definitely been a lot of learning. But I've also met a lot of other people who have ADHD that work in that industry as well. So it's great.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions about ADHD?
Absolutely. So definitely some of the biggest ones are the first thing I can think of is just that we come across um like malicious, or like we don't mean well, when I promise you we mean the wellest of anybody ever. Like I've had a lot of kind of people be like, oh, like can't believe like you're acting this way or something like that. And I'm like, okay, first of all, um what control do you think I have right now? Like if I'm acting this way impulsively, like I guarantee I also don't want to be doing this. I promise you. So it's definitely hard when people kind of have the misconception of, oh, it's just like a behavior disorder. And I'm like, well, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. It literally is how our brain is wired, but okay. Uh, and so I definitely, if somebody's talking like that, like I'm one of the first ones to jump up and be like, not to be that person, but well, actually, because it affects so many people. And I'm like, if you're just having this kind of lens about any like ADHD or anybody on any anywhere on the spectrum. Like our behavior, I promise you, like it's one of the hardest kind of phrases for me that I always come back to thinking in that regard is actions speak louder than words. And I'm like, oh, okay, but I promise you, our actions are not what you think they are. Like, I guarantee you, the what you're thinking, reasoning, it's not. Like, just it's not. You don't know how we think. You can try to understand it, but I don't think that you're gonna know how we think. And so a lot of the time, like the meaning that I'm intending does not come through, and something comes across quite impulsive or just like ludicrous or just and I'm like, okay, no, but let me and so I've gotten to the habit of I mean, I talk a lot in general, but I'm an over explainer. Like I'm constantly having to like justify myself. And so even just as simple as asking my parents for something like when I was younger, like I will set up every single possible reason for this thing. Like my parents are always like, Amber, like if you're gonna ask them, you can't lead with all of your points. I'm like, no, I have to because I always have to back myself up. And like even as like a kid, I knew that. Or um, even just the fact of like ADHD can come in so many shapes and forms. Like masking is a thing. Like even something that's so crazy to think about is when I was little, my parents would be like, Amber, like why do you like why are you so amazing? Like when you go to play at people's houses and you come here and like this is how you act. And at like age like 5 or 6, I was like, oh well, I saved the bad Amber for home. Like obviously I didn't know that was masking, but when I think about that and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy to think that like it's kind of sad. Like that is basically the biggest misconception, kind of that whole idea. And the second one that always comes to mind about as well is we don't want to make it about us. Like we care so much. We care more than any type of person could ever care, probably. Like, and people don't realize that. Like I have the habit, like as many ADHDers do, of I need to make everything personally relevant. I need to connect everything to me. And so if you're telling me a story, it doesn't matter whether I have a place in the story or not. Like I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna tell you a story that's semi, maybe not even related because it made me think of it. And I've actually lost like friendships over that because they think that I just don't care about them, or they think that I am just making everything all about me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like you're one of my closest friends. Like I am so invested in you. And like even one of my closest friends to this day, like we've worked it out since, but like they had thought that I just didn't care.
Do you feel ADHD has benefited your life?
I definitely think that it has given me just so much compassion to view the world and to view people with. Where I know other people, like if they're not thinking or they're not concerned with how every single person around them is thinking and feeling at all times, like it's you can just kind of go about your merry way and but whatever. But I'm like, no, like I care so much about people who might not even give me a second thought, but it just immediately it's overwhelming to think of how much we think and care about other people. And I definitely see that as a strong point because again, like that's going to make me a better teacher. Like that's going to make me genuinely care about all of my students. I'm not just going to be like, okay, whatever, you're a student, you come into my class, do my class, and you leave. Like, no, like you're an adolescent. That's such a hugely important part of your life. And I don't even care if you remember the material I teach you. I want you to remember the life lessons I teach you. Like, I want you to come out of my class being a better person. Like, and so I think that's definitely a huge positive. I think as well, just the fact that we are so kind of fast thinking, like we're immediately like problem solving, like it's so handy to kind of be able to problem solve, rather than just feeling like stuck. Like we definitely know very well like what it is to feel stuck, but we also know what it is to just be so passionate about something that like you can't even contain it. You have to tell everybody. Like if I'm reading a book, I have to tell you the entire plot. It doesn't matter that you are not reading the book or you'll never read the book. Like we just exude passion and we find something that we are interested in. Like it's so amazing. Like the capabilities of hyperfixation. It's kind of like magic, honestly. And so just we are able to kind of greet the world with this like childlike wonder, which is amazing because nobody wants to grow up and just be this like kind of monotonous like adult who's blah 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 like but we are able to kind of keep that with us, and be excited and like have passion, and kind of see the world through a somewhat optimistic lens, which is really nice.